with drawing pencils, typically, at least in the US, people overseas always ask me, what do you mean? What's a number two? A number two, that yellow number two is what I'm referring to. And let's see if I have one. I don't have one handy, but a yellow number two is basically your HB pencil. And I'm just going to give you a quick little demo. The reason you need all of these different pencils is because you need to have all of these, be able to draw all these different values or the lightness and darkness of your drawing. So that's your number two. It's like your yellow number two pencil. This is a 2H. Think of H. H is hard. Over here would be a 3H or a 4H or a 5H. The harder the graphite, if you look at the tip, it's thin. It's really thin compared to a soft pencil. And that's because it's very hard. And the harder the graphite, the lighter it's going to draw. This isn't going to be super dramatic, but you should be able to see a little bit of a difference. Okay, so that's your 2H. We call it -2. I don't know. All right. And then going in this direction, sorry, I've got a lot of use to them. This is an 8B. The higher the B number, the softer the graphite is, and you can see it's much thicker. So I know just by experience, every time I pick up a pencil, I could look at it and see how thick it is, and I could tell that it's going to be a much darker pencil. So let's go through these. I'm not going to do all of them. You don't necessarily need to use all of these different pencils. I typically use maybe three or four. So that one is a 3B. And then we're just going to jump all the way to the end over here. This is an 8B. Some sets will go up higher to like a 10B, even a 12B. And then they have, some brands have really, really dark pencils that'll go even darker. So that's a 8B. So if you compare it to your number two pencil, your yellow number two, imagine if you had a drawing that, and the lighting in here is bad, it's shining on it, so you can't really see how dark it is, but imagine if you were drawing something with really dark shading or a black background, and this is as dark as you could draw, because all you have is that number two. So you need to have these other pencils so you could draw much darker. And in comparison, this is a colored pencil. You can't draw black with graphite pencils. You'd have to switch over to charcoal. But this is just a black colored pencil. Just so you could see, your number two is nowhere near black. And by contrast, I mean, that looks like a very, very light gray. So that's why you need these different pencils. All right, erasers. I typically use these guys. These are, what are they called? Gummy, kneadable erasers. But I'll use these for big areas, but if I want to get something more precise, I'll use one of these. And this is basically the same material on the back of your mechanical pencil. See if I got one. I don't have it handy. It's called a plastic eraser. It's not really plastic, obviously, or an elastomer eraser, but it erases very well without damaging your paper, and I think that's the most important part. Obviously, they have different sizes. Here's another one that's the same material. The main thing about erasers, this was my number two that I had, is these erasers, it's not the yellow number two, but the back of your number two pencil, it's a 50-50 chance. Normally these are orange or yellow. 50-50 chance when you erase, it's gonna leave orange behind. But let's see. This one isn't bad. But I just wouldn't recommend them because unless you test it out first. But these ones also tear up your paper a little bit more or beat up your paper a little bit more. But here's a mechanical pencil. Same thing. These elastomer erasers, they're typically white and they erase very well and don't leave a ton of stuff behind. But I don't want to bore you with pencils or erasers, so let's get started. So I have to do this somewhat small so we can get this done in an hour. This is actually 5 by 7. But I'm going to teach you about all these different pencils while we put this little scene together. I know you may not have these, so just do your best to mimic what what I'm doing and just push a little bit harder. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is lay out our what are we drawing? A little snowman. I'm going to start with a circle there. This one's going to overlap a little bit. This is very simple, and I think but also a very rewarding lesson because it goes over so many concepts. And we'll do one more down here. Even perspective. Okay, we've got the basic shape of our snowman. Now let's erase some of these guidelines. Remember, we wanted them to overlap. So we've got the basic shapes. Let me check the chat. Make sure I'm not going too fast. All right. Everybody hear me okay? I know one or two of you lost audio, but okay, instead of going all the way down like that, we're going to draw a little scarf. So put a line there. And we're going to bring it down. It's not going to go straight across. It's going to come down a little bit. And actually, let's make this one kind of at an angle. We're starting with very simple shapes. And then it's going to wrap, it's going to curve and come up a little bit higher over here because that's kind of where it's tied over on the side where it kind of hangs down. So you can see it kind of overlaps on top of this one. We'll just cut it off here. And that's just a visual so you know what we're doing, but you can erase some of those guidelines. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to mention, this is an HB. We're starting with the HB pencil, or your basic number 2. All right. Now, let's see, right around, we'll say halfway. I'm drawing it at an angle. This is our horizon line, and it kind of curves. It's like a rolling hill. I'll give you guys a second to catch up because I didn't tell you what pencil. Thank you, Colleen. And then we'll do one more. So if I was going to do the hat, and if I did it this way, just as an example, it would look as if the hat was pointed down, like he has his head down like this. We don't want that, so so don't do that. I should have said that before. What we're going to do with perspective, we're still going to draw this kind of saucer behind it. But now we can see the underside of the hat. And then we'll draw the top and make it kind of curved on top. Should match this line here. Yeah, sorry about that. This is an HB pencil. All right, we've got the layout of it. We don't have any arms or any details yet, but I just wanted to make sure that we have the layout of our drawing done. Now we're going to use the side of our pencil, not the tip. If we use the tip, you're going to get a nice, clean, sharp line like this. We want to use the side. And that's going to give us softer shading. And we're going to shade, again, with our number 2. this entire background from here all the way up. I'm going to show you how to layer and create a cool background with depth, kind of by cheating, just by using your different types of pencils. And this doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to have some lines where you overlap and everything, but you can see by using the side, it's going on pretty soft. It's a different texture than it, or different line than it would be if you're using the tip of your pencil. But we're going to put snow falling. And I always tell everybody, you guys probably heard me over and over and over again, there should be no white on your paper. I know you're thinking, well, that's the white of the snowman. The snowman's white. It's white snow. But if you think about it, if we wanted to draw snow right here, how would you draw that with a pencil? You can't really draw white on white paper. However, if you erased a spot, now you can see it. So you need to have contrast. And I know it might seem really dark at first, but when we use our dark pencils, remember this, we thought that this number 2 pencil was pretty dark, but then when you compare it against that colored black colored pencil, this is really light in comparison. So it's going to, when we first start, it's going to look a little bit dark, but then eventually when we add our really dark values, it's not going to look as dark. And we're even going to shade the snowman in and make the snowman gray. I do a fun exercise like this in my course where we kind of make this forest scene. If any of you have taken it, you know probably exactly what one I'm talking about, where we do that little road through the forest and we just layer in these different pencils to create depth in the background and make this little forest. And it's fairly simple to do. I think it's like Bob Ross with pencils, because there's not a lot of technical skill to it. It's just understanding the concept. Thanks, Sue. Sue, I should hire you to be my moderator. Okay, let's see. Almost done. Now there's a few different ways to shade this, or to blend this. We've already shaded. You always see me using these guys. It's just a blending stump. You can see it's really dirty because I use it quite a bit. But for this background, I don't want to use that. I'm going to use a tissue. It's a little bit of a bigger area. So I'm just going to smudge it. What it's doing now, you can see how it has all the little grain, the little white spots. All we're doing now is kind of pushing the graphite deeper into the tooth of the paper, so you don't see all those tiny little grainy spots in the paper. And it's okay if you go over it a little bit. All right, so we've got everything gray. Now I'm going to jump to a 2H pencil, or you could use the HB if you want to. We're just going to go a little bit lighter down here. Even the hill and the snow is going to be, and the snowman is going to be shaded in. If you watch a lot of artists, or if you're familiar with this, all we're doing right now, this is called blocking in our shapes or blocking in our shadows. It's a really rough, quick process to get everything. You don't even necessarily need a detailed drawing. If you block everything in the beginning and get everything right where it belongs, it'll make your drawing much easier to put together. Because imagine if we started doing all these details and we're like, oh shoot, we need, we don't have enough space for his arms or something like that. Then you have to erase it and then, or just start over. So it's best to start very simple, especially with your simple shapes, and work your way up from there. I don't have a lot of sketchbooks anymore because most of my stuff was destroyed in a fire many, many years ago. But I had tons and tons of sketchbooks throughout my whole life. But you can see for the ones sketchbooks I still have, I found one or two of them. 90% of my drawings are unfinished. And that's because I just immediately start drawing details. You might as well be drawing with a pen. And then once you mess up, you have to start over. I'm just going to blend that again with my tissue. All we're doing is trying to get that gray now, gray down. And then we're going to say that our light source is coming from this direction. It's coming down like this. So that means this side of the face is going to be in the light, and this side of the body and the bottom is going to be in the light. So this side will be darker. And I'm going to draw, instead of this line going perfect like that, it's going to be kind of flatter. And then we'll start shading over here. You can see this is a little bit of the cast shadow from this cylinder. So it comes down like this, and then this side is going to be darker. And don't worry if you can't see a lot of your guidelines. It's okay. Remember, we're just blocking in the basic shadows and basic shapes. And we only want this front part to be white. Even the scarf. Remember, no white on your paper, except for the brightest highlights, because then it would be overexposed. In my, I really go into detail about this in my course, especially my anatomy and portraits course, because people tend to leave, they'll just draw shading under the nose or shading just the shadow, but you're forgetting about midtones. And what midtones are, obviously it's the middle. So these are kind of midtones. You're going to have your black highlights, your white or your black shadows, your white highlights, and then your midtones. So if you kind of simplify your drawing into just 3 values, it'll make a little bit more sense and make shading a little bit easier. Okay. I'm going to blend that. Don't worry, it'll eventually start to make sense. Let's see. All right. Now the fun part. We're still not putting any details in, but I'm going to go back to my HB pencil, and we're going to do a layer of trees in the background. Sorry, the bottom area, you can use the same one, your HB or a 2H. You just want it to be a little bit lighter than the background. Now at the side of my pencil, I'm going to basically, we'll draw a tree here. I'll just kind of pencil in my simple shapes. Maybe another one there, one here, and one there. Again, I'm just going to use the side of my pencil. This is very far off into the distance, so there's not much detail in it. You just want it to be just a little bit darker than the background. And you could skip a little couple spots. You don't want a perfect triangle. You could have some spots where it kind of jumps out, branches jump out a little bit more, but again, just a little bit darker than the background. All the way to that horizon line or that little hill line. And then for each one of these trees, I'm going to grab my blending stump. If you don't have one, you could use a tissue. You could try not to use your finger because your finger has oils on it, and then you may end up smudging your work. So use a tissue, a blending stump. You can even roll paper up really tight. but and kind of make one of these. But now I'm just going to blend it together, and you can see, remember all those little grainy spots. It's going to start filling those in, so it just makes it a little bit smoother. Some people hate this sound. Kind of bugs me sometimes, almost like a nails on a chalkboard. There we go. We've got a out of focus tree in the background. We'll do one more over here. Again, with our HB. We're just drawing it a little bit darker. And then we'll call this the sky, but it's not really the sky. I'm going to draw this all the way down and just connect it to that other tree. And these blending stumps, if you're not familiar, they come in all sorts of different sizes. We got a little skinnier, thin one. This one's for a little bit more precise. And you've got some real tiny ones too for smaller details. And I do not know why. When people always tell me that, they've taken college courses and things like that, or drawing classes, and they've never heard of these. And I think it's just a secret, and that's because art teachers want you to learn how to use all of these different pencils to get these different values. But I try to do things the quickest, simplest way. So, all right, there's another little tree in the background. We'll do another one over here. I'll even just skip a little spot just to give it a little bit more character. Make some overlap and go further out. And all the way to that horizon line of the hill. Try to get a nice line right there on the hill, so it'll really make that hill pop out. And then we'll go up here and do our last tree. Should be pretty simple. Maybe you guys are thinking, oh, this is way too easy for me, but it'll come together. It'll start to make sense. You'll understand exactly why we're doing this here in a second. All right, I'm going to get that blending stump again. I'm just going to blend it all together to make it a little smoother. It also softens the edges. So it looks like, if you're familiar with photography, it's called depth of field, where only our snowman is in focus or something closer to the camera is in focus, and everything in the background is really blurry. Like if you look at macro photography or something, people zooming in really, really close to something, the background, sometimes it'll almost just be a solid color because it's so out of focus. It's kind of the concept we're going for here. Okay. Let's see. All right, we've got our little rolling hill and some trees in the background. Now we're going to jump to, that was an HB. Let's jump to I don't want to go too dark. Let's do a 3B. And then now we're going to layer in some more trees. So right here, that's going to be our next tree. And it's going to be a little bit darker than these ones. And you can see I'm adding a little bit more detail. It's still very basic. I'm just kind of going back and forth, almost like these little Z's. But you definitely want to make sure that it's darker than these ones. Go all the way down here. Maybe we could just put, maybe there's some little bushes here. Again, they're out of focus. They're way off in the distance. This isn't our subject. The trees are not our subject. The snowman's our subject. So this is all kind of secondary, and there's not a lot of detail. And because it's out of focus. Now you could blend it. And you can see just by using and changing your pencils to a softer, darker pencil, now we've got this layer or this darker tree, and you can tell it's closer to the foreground, and it makes these trees, these lighter trees, look like they're further off into the distance. So let's add one more. We'll make this one a little bit taller, something like that. You don't need to make it curve like I did there. Now I've got a little bit of a blur because this light is shining, or not a blur, but this doesn't quite look as dark as it does to me in real life because of the lighting. Normally I try to do these during the day, but here in the winter time, at 6 o'clock California time, it's been dark for an hour or two already. So okay, let's see. I've got lotion on my tissues. Sound like my wife. I guess there's only one way to find out. I wouldn't do it, but um, like the scented tissues, if that's what you're talking about, that could be tricky. I'm not sure if it'll. I wouldn't risk it. I think it might um, end up doing something like this. And then let's do one little baby tree here. You can give some sharper lines here and there if you want, and that'll make it stand out a little bit more against that background. You can see it's almost like a foggy day. And then some of these, if there's not high enough contrast from the trees in the background, you can just darken it up a little bit, but there we go. So now you're starting to create depth to your drawing just by changing the pencils. All right. Now that we've got that started, let's jump to our snowman and start adding some of those details. This is a 3B pencil. All right, Sarah, it worked out. Very cool. And we'll start penciling in the eyes. So right here, I'm going to draw the first one. Draw another one over there. I'm going to draw the carrot overlapping just a little bit. And then that's a little trick to create the perspective or that angle of the backside here. And then for the mouth, I'm just going to do tiny, tiny little circles. I got a bug in my, or a frog in my throat. Okay, now for the belly and those buttons, we're going to kind of follow this line and use a little contour line there to give us a guideline for those buttons. We're just going to do 3. 1, 2, 3. But by curving them like that, you're showing the contour of the belly. All right. Now I know you're going to probably say, what about the arms? All right, so we're going to draw kind of lightly, and I like to make these not perfect little sticks or hands. And we'll draw one more. Maybe this one is coming out this way. All right. Make sure everybody's caught up. All right. Now on the bottom, notice it's going to have kind of a sharper, we're going to make this curved line, but it's going to kind of almost come to a point right here. And then curve the line up to that circle. Now it'll look like he's sitting on a hill a little bit, or like that the bottom part is almost flat. Kind of touch of that scarf a little. And then now we'll start adding some of the details. So let's start over on this hat. Remember, our light source is coming from this direction. So right here, that part of the hat is going to be in the light and get darker and darker. But I'm going to switch to my darkest pencil. This is an 8B. I'm going to switch and color that in really dark. And my light often makes this look shiny. So I apologize. And then from there, we're just going to start and get lighter and lighter. You could switch over to a different pencil too. Once we start getting to the lighter area, I'm going to switch to an HB. We'll shade that in and then just push a little bit darker or a little bit harder to blend it into that 8B. And this is kind of what I mean. You don't necessarily need, you don't necessarily need every pencil. Just maybe 3 or 4. Now I'm going to switch back to my 8B, and we're going to color all of this, or shade all of this underside of the hat completely black or as dark as we can. Sometimes I'll leave, see how I'm leaving that little stripe right there? Just to separate give it a little bit of separation so you can still see the brim of the hat. You can see I use a lot of this pencil. It's the shortest. All right. And right there, we got one of those little shiny spots from the light. But Hannah, I really like your drawing course, Shane. Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate it. All right, now I'm going to switch back to my HB. This is basically your number. Actually, I'm lying. We're going to go back to that 8B, and we're going to put a small little circle just on the tip of the eyes. That's the light source coming in. We're going to shade the rest in really dark. Make sure that you have a nice sharp pencil so you get those sharp lines and small details. Now we can go, I think you're not going to see much of the highlights in these, but if you wanted to, just make the the right side darker. And if you wanted to leave the top left corner with a little highlight, if you could squeeze it in there, if your pencil's sharp enough, go for it. Otherwise, you could just color the whole thing in. All right. I should just keep one of these in my hand at all times. So this is my HB. Draw a little bit of a shadow underneath. And then I'm going to use this blending stump. This is a small one. I'm going to blend that over. And then watch what I do here. I'm drawing the shadow, just pulling it down from the graphite. I'm not drawing the shadow with my pencil. I could just use the graphite that's already on my blending stump or pull it from the nose. And I could do the same thing with the eyes. And that's just going to start the shadow of the little coal. And we'll do the same thing here. You can just pull some of it from the hat and pull it down. Now I'm going to go to my HB and we'll start our shading. All on the right hand side. I know our snowman and snow is white, but we are going to have some dark shading. I'm going to blend it with my blending stump all the way over. And then let's darken the bottom side of that nose, or that carrot, and just this side, the bottom side and the right hand side. Darken this line just a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit more shading up the side of the head. And make sure when you're doing this, you have to tilt your head. You have to tilt your head to examine your work. I catch myself doing that on video and I always get embarrassed. All right, and blend that a little bit more. And if you've ever taken a beginner class, and they usually start with simple shapes and spheres and stuff like that, and lighting, but right here, this is called reflective lighting. And this might be too small to really demonstrate this, but you want it just a little bit lighter on your sphere. All right, let's see how we doing on time. Ooh, we got to get moving. All right, let's jump down here. This is our HB. I'm going to draw a little bit of a shadow underneath that scarf. And then bring it around the body. This is our HB pencil. I think I said that. Just get lighter and lighter towards the left-hand side. We'll blend it with our blending stump. Remember, only this left-hand side is going to be white. And then we can go back to our darker pencil. This is a 8B. We don't want it super dark, so I'm going to be somewhat light here. Just clean up that edge a little bit. And we can go darker right at the crease of the scarf. And blend down a little bit. All right, let's draw the coal. This is our 8B. Mine doesn't smile. All right, we're going to draw the same. Remember that angle. So we're going to draw that same little highlight right here on the top left of each of these little bits of coal. Shade it all in. And then we're going to let our tools do the work for us. We'll grab our blending stump. Just add that lights the shadow. And then we'll do, let's see, let's go back to our HB. We'll start adding some shading on this last little section. So if you think about it, if your light source is coming down this way, if you drew a 90-degree angle, if that makes sense, to the light source, that's where you would kind of cut it in half. And then here, you're drawing the shadow from the belly. So now from this point, you would just draw darker and darker into the shadows. And lighter this way. I'll go back to my blending stump. Blend it all together. And I might go to my tissue since it's cleaner. Just do a smoother transition. And then now with our HB following that light source, we're going to have a shadow in this direction. Make sure you go beyond, almost around the body. And then you could blend it with your blending stuff. Just kind of pull it. You don't need to go directly down. Kind of grab it and just pull some of that graphite over. It'll be darker right at the base. And then just fade and get lighter and lighter out in this direction. Now with that dirty blending stump, you could just add some more little rolling hills. And just give the background a little bit more character. All right. Now grab your 8B and let's see. And we're going to draw and touch up that scarf. So I think if we just do little scribble lines like this, it kind of creates the texture for us. And this way. And then if you grab your blending stump and just kind of smoothed over that. Oh, this one's really chewed up. I think the dog must have ate that one. That creates the texture. And then we go over it with a pencil to blend it out. And then now, this is where you really go in with those dark. Remember, everything seems a little dark and muddy, but when you go in with these darker pencils now, in contrast, it's not necessarily going to look as dark. We'll go under the head. We go under here a little bit. And then kind of like highlights, you don't want a ton of black. You just want to use the black for the darkest areas and your highlights for the brightest areas. We'll kind of fade that out too. Let's see, what am I missing here? Okay, now on our, even on the snow, I want it to be at least a little gray, because when we go to erase, you're going to need, when we put the snow falling from the sky, you're not going to be able to see it unless it has a little bit of gray on our drawing. I'm just going to darken this up a little bit more. Yeah, it looks like a Christmas card. I've seen similar ones. All right, now I'm going to jump. Let's make a little bit more texture to my hill. A couple small ones this way too. Okay, and I know we're zoomed in really tight, so if you take a step back and look at your drawing, it should look a little bit better. You always have to take a step back. Everything looks, when you zoom in real close, nothing looks, or you can see all the tiny little imperfections. But that's the best part about art. I always say, I have a buddy who tells me I'm going to lose my job over AI because everybody can create their own art. And I told him, I think the opposite. I think it's going to make hand-drawn art like this worth even more because it was created by somebody with a soul. So that's my prediction, at least. All right, now for the last little, actually, I'm going to put a little crease right here too. See how it kind of overlaps like that? I try not to do really hard outlines because it ends up, no matter how much detail you put into it, it ends up looking a little cartoony. But now let's add those little, I call these little furlies. I don't know what they're flurries, furlies. I'm not sure what they are. But the little the little flyaways on a scarf. And then for the last step, you can get an eraser. Now that you have a dark enough background, because you use midtones instead of just, and you shaded everything in, you can start erasing snow. And you can see even over here, you're going to see it in front of the body too. And you can erase all over your drawing. And I know you may not have one of these fancy erasers, but there's other tricks too, like the one, let's see, where's my, you could use little drops of whiteout. I think I had at one point an acrylic, yeah, here we go. It's just an acrylic paint pen. And a brand new one. And this will really make the difference. Especially right on those dark areas. And try to, sometimes if you do these little saucers in a direction, it'll make it look like it's kind of windy. I guess if our scarf was hanging that way, they would be going this way. But you can see even on the really light areas, the light shaded areas, you can still see the snow. And you wouldn't be able to see it if you didn't have that gray. So that's why I always say no white on your paper unless it's the brightest highlights. And another little trick, try to like not make it all perfectly spaced. Put some bunch together. And then empty spots. Maybe we'll have one right in front of that spot. See how I kind of bunch 2 or 3 together. You could do this with an eraser. You could do it with whiteout. I even have an electric eraser that I use, and it's just the same. It's just like this, but it's electric and it spins and makes my job or makes things move much quicker. And you can put as much or as little as you want. Maybe it's a real heavy storm. But you get the drift. So hopefully that makes sense. And then if you wanted, you could go and touch up some of those little highlights you had in the eyes or even on top of the nose or on the side. But hopefully that helps you out and you had a little bit of fun and you've got a really cool looking snowman. You've learned how to use those pencils and layer in depth just by changing the value. It's really cool.